Yep. Yep. Okay, we've got the Regional Public Transport Report as the next agenda. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, kia ora. Thank you for having me here this morning. I do want to say right up front that the person who would normally write this public transport report has gone on parental leave. So I've written the report for her based on the information that she was able to give me before she left. So I am likely to not be able to answer any of the really technical questions, but I will do my best. Phil may be able to help, and we've got Trudy and Vince here if they're able to help. Otherwise, we'll come back to you with the answers. So,
Thanks, Julie.
I'll just give a quick run through. So we've got changes to the Eastern Connector, which is the route that goes through Manamatapiako and into Haraki. So there's been some consultation around the services there, and those, as a result, we've got some amendments to the services, and they're going to be included in the next suite of network changes, which gets uploaded to the system this month. We've got some other changes across the network, also to be included in the September updates, coming into effect on the 30th of this month. We've got Raglan, which is an extra return trip to and from Hamilton on weekends and public holidays, bringing the total number of trips to 3. And the service to Manu Bay will be extended to all year round and not just the summer months. So that's 2 trips, Monday to Friday, and all trips on weekends and public holidays. So that change is being fully funded by Waikato District Council. Changes to Te Huia include that we're going to, Te Huia is going to be stopping at the upgraded Pukekohe station from 30th of September. No?
And I'll just update the council committee there.
Please, Phil.
So you'll have seen that. It's worth noting that following the council discussion on this topic last week, we've corrected the media release there. The commitment to stop at Pukekohe is still in, but we haven't got a date yet because there are some Auckland Council KiWIRAIL matters to resolve in terms of consents and access and things. So that process is underway, but the commitment to that date is no longer the case.
Thank you, Phil. Is there anything else there in Te Huia that that is different to what we've got there? And we've got the concession to Super Gold card holders. Yep.
Angus, did you want to answer that?
Yes, I was just going to add a little bit of additional colour there. So it's in relation to codes of compliance. So we are very much on track with the work we're doing at Pukekohe Station, but in order for it to be accessible to the public, you know, a fully compliant arrangement, we have to go through all of that process. Those won't be done until the end of this month in terms of applications made, and typically it takes 4 to 6 weeks for councils to do all of their reviews and checks and give that approval. So we're just in that point, and it'll be working its way through.
Thanks, Angus.
Thank you. There are other changes to concessions and fares for Te Huia, and changes to the Christmas New Year timetable. So only the high frequency services will be running on Christmas Day and Boxing Day and New Year's Day and 2nd of January. And of course, the next item is we've got some future work in Taupo District, and that hopefully can answer some of your questions, Councillor. So council staff are working towards a network review for some existing services, with specific consideration of the Turangi to Taupo leg of the service. We will report further at the December RTC meeting.
Thanks, Julie. Any questions for Julie? Yes, Claire.
Yes, Julie. I was interested in the feedback from the Eastern Connector consultation about how crowded those some of those services are, you know, those trips, particularly the ones I think that have got school children on, because even though you talk about, or it's talked about changing, you know, particular services, there wasn't any discussion on increasing the capacity here to make sure that people aren't standing, you know, for a 45-minute trip or something, because that came through really strongly in the individual, I suppose those are verbatim comments. Yeah. And I felt it was a bit of an omission that it wasn't picked up at all in the report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The constraint there is the contract and the funding. That's a topic that is something we are looking at in the wider future of bus services conversation. But for now, we've only been able to adapt within the budget that we have available, unfortunately. So it's a very good comment.
I mean, I appreciate that nothing can be done immediately, but when you're giving a response, you know, for people that have been through a consultation, even if you say, we picked up this theme, we can't do anything now, but it's definitely going to be something that we'll be looking at in the future, because otherwise people get a bit sort of, depressed about being asked to give feedback and nothing happens. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Julia. If there's Mia Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Julie. And I flagged this earlier with Nigel, you would have heard that. I would be remiss when I go back to my communities if I didn't raise this. We basically have at the moment no public transport whatsoever in the Coromandel area, and I'm sure you're aware. We did have a trial running from Coromandel to Thames, which I think was quite well supported. That was extended and then finished at the end of June. So there are no trials running. We had the proposed trials which extended from Tairua and didn't include Whitianga, so we've had some correspondence about that. So if I could get an update on what's likely to happen there, and obviously some is going to depend on the funding discussions that are ongoing and the rating discussions. But we are going to come under pressure from our communities to address it. There's no public transport at all. What can we do?
Thank you, Mayor Salt. I will pass this on to the people who know more than I do, and we'll get a response out to you. Thank you.
The only thing to add is that's the funding constraint that is on us across every new service over the next 3 years would apply to that as well. And that's the context really for where we go from here.
Angela?
Yeah, probably would just add to that around community transport and what that could, what holes that could plug really. Yeah, I know that a lot of work has taken place up in your area regarding that. And yeah, I'd be interested to see how we could enhance that or, yeah.
Thanks, Angela, through the chair, if I may. Yeah, look, very, very good point. And community transport is still there. It plays a massive role. The problem that we have in our area is that a lot of the volunteers for community transport are of a certain age, and they're getting more of a certain age. And so the numbers start to dwindle. So some kind of integration and support, coordinated activity, I think needs to be addressed, not just in this forum, but by our own communities as well. So really good point. Look forward to that. Thanks, Angela.
Yeah, Phil.
I'll just make a comment on the community transport. So you'll be aware that the Regional Council's long-term plan included an uplift in funding for that from 200,000 to 300,000. So that the symposium that was mentioned in March is going to be a time for us to talk about increased opportunities for community transport. The other thing I'd note is that in that low cost, low risk application, we had applied for subsidy for community transport, which would have allowed us to double that again, which has been declined. But that model of community transport as a key part of public transport and growing is something that we're really, really interested in. And we were looking for ways to increase the ability for that to plug some of these gaps.
Phil, thank you. I hadn't realised that. I'd missed that. So that's really good news to take back tomorrow as well. So thank you.
Okay, Julie, we've got a resolution here for the report for the regional public transport be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Claire, and a seconder. I'll second it. Okay, all those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, next on the agenda, we've got the regional NZTA NZTA update. David, your last and final report for this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's all right with you, I'll take the report as read. I've got a PowerPoint presentation, but before I do that, while Dave brings that up, I might just try and share my screen. I've joined the meeting and I'll try and share my screen because I have an answer on medium barriers. This is the power of having a really good team behind you where you can email and go, can you tell me, please? Oh, I thought I joined this meeting. Okay. I share screen. I share my screen. Okay, look. Oh, right, let's see if we can get this to work. There we go. So this is quick data. It's all severities of crashes at all speed limits, so it's not filtered. This is since 2014 across the whole of the region, noting that Rotorua is in there just because of a regional construct. And you can see by year within each, I can send you this data, Mike, when it's more detailed, if you like. But it just gives you a sense that, so for example, this is all crashes where a barrier was struck. So Hamilton City, 106 over the last 10 years, Karakia District, 106 over the last 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. You can read those figures for yourself. Waikato District, 861 over the last 10 years, Waipa, 167. Just on the Cambridge to Periri barrier, which was only put in 2020, 101 hits since 2020. So, you know, grand total 1,661 hits on barriers in the last 10 years essentially across the region. If you want to take Rotorua District out, it's only 17, but that gives you a sense of how significant some of those areas. And in the Cambridge Periri one's quite dramatic, 101 hits since 2020, 4 years. So that I asked for side barriers and medium barriers. Yeah, so more than half are medians, but I asked for both. The reason I asked is they said to me, well, we can't, this quickly, we can't give you just medians or whatever. But so that's all barrier hits that are recorded. Not all are recorded, so that's the other thing. So we do get people hit them and then just drive away, and then the maintenance guys come back and go, oh, what the hell happened there? So that's recorded, but it's quite significant when you start looking at that. Oh, look, there's a range of causes. Speed, there's impairment is quite significant. If Jeff Penno was here, he would tell you how horrifying the impairment stats are. It's extraordinary how many crashes have an impairment: drug, alcohol, sleep deprivation, etc. But yeah, speed obviously plays a significant role as well. So there you go. Just thought that would, and I'll get you for the next one. I'll get a proper breakdown that gives you a bit more detail. But there you go. That's the power of having a really good team who can respond quite quickly to. Won't be here. My replacement will bring you that data.
We're getting close to going into grieving stage, so you'll have to.
That's all right, we'll still see them.
Yeah. Okay. I'll stop sharing. I can figure out how to do that, and then we'll. You help me there, Dave. Just kick me out, and then we'll go to the presentation. Thanks, mate. So yeah, very quickly, PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to talk about NLTP because we've already done that. Next slide, please, Dave. Just a few things that are at a central government level happening that you will be hearing more about. So I've tried to keep this just to the really big things that you're going to be hearing more about. So time of use charging, as you know, government currently drafting legislation around allowing for time of use charging. That legislation considers the ability of all RCAs to make use of time of use charging. So it's not just on state highways, but also local roads. If you were of a mind to look at road pricing, Tauranga City Council, for example, very, very interested in this as an option for themselves in terms of managing congestion and driving behaviour change, not just in terms of time of use, but also of using alternative modes of travel. I mean, the theory is you manage demand. In some cases, you generate revenue. That's not necessarily a revenue tool so much as a demand management tool, but you can generate revenue. The legislation's looking at if revenue is generated as a consequence, how is that used in terms of reinvestment back into the network? So the consideration is that all of that revenue should be invested back into the network, as opposed to, we're going to make revenue and we're going to use it for other things. Tolling also, so you'll be aware that the consultation for tolling is out at the moment on the significant state highways. Again, variable response across the country to that. Bay of Plenty, they kind of went, oh yeah, we're used to having toll roads. Other parts of the country have gone, oh my God, toll roads. So we've got the whole spectrum. It's, again, the purpose of tolling very clearly in the legislation is it generates revenue to recover the cost and maintenance of the road and to pay for the actual infrastructure of the road as well. But that's all it can be used for. So again, it's not one of those things where you can use it to generate income for other purposes. And yeah, the support for this kind of congestion charging, time of use charging, whatever you want to call it, is quite significant when you start looking at the stats in New Zealand. God bless us, we have got heaps and heaps of cars. Our time in cars, our time per kilometre is poor. So we spend a lot of time in our car, we drive a lot of kilometres, and we spend way more time in our car per kilometre than other comparable countries in the world. So we do have a problem, and this is just one solution or one attempt to solve some of that problem.
Angela?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, David. Just a couple of questions. First of all, tolling's brilliant. I put it on every road, but
so the ledge
user
says
pays.
you can only use it where you have an alternative route, a viable alternative route.
Just in terms of the time of use charging with the infrastructure, is there any, do you have any understanding of whether there'll be central government funding to put that infrastructure in place? Because obviously it's technology required to.
Yeah, significant.
Yeah.
We're doing the numbers at the moment on, for example, as we're doing the tolling consultation on Takitumu, because that's probably the first live one. We're doing the numbers at the moment on what even just the gantries and things to put the infrastructure in place, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
There is some conversation happening in the context of, do you get to a place where central government funds up front and then recovers the cost back from the tolling of that as a sort of a loan facility, if you like, against future income. That's water to go under the bridge at the moment. So,
Okay, because that was my follow-up question. And then what happens with the revenue? So it depends who puts it in, perhaps.
But
but the revenue would follow the same principle as tolling revenue.
Yes. So the very clear statutory requirement is that revenue has to be reinvested back into maintenance of that road, or the capital cost of that road. So you could, for example, build the gantry, either government front up, or you IFF loan, or however you funded it, you would then be able to use that to pay that back. But you can't use it for something else. Yeah.
And do you think will it follow again the same principle of tolling, where it can only be done where there's an alternative route, which I guess for time and use charging, there's many alternative routes if we look at an inner city.
Yeah, I think the real trick is law of unintended consequences. When you start putting those things in and people run or go places where you didn't expect, and then you put pressure on the rest of the network, and suddenly you've got congestion in an area you never had it before, and you go, what's happening here? It's because you're charging here. So there's a lot of modelling that needs to be done around that first, but the legislative requirements a little different in that context. So you as I say, there's still water to go under the bridge there, and they're still working on that, but there's not the same imperative as tolling.
Yeah, okay. And it's not going to be something that's mandatory.
I think I know that what's been contemplated at the moment is an enabling as opposed to a requiring facility.
Okay.
Clear.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm really keen to understand the difference between time of use charging compared to congestion charging or tolling, you know, because you mentions there it's different, but I'd really appreciate understanding how it's differentiated.
They're not actually as different as you, so tolling can be a form of time of use charging, or time of use charging is a form of tolling. So essentially you could say, if you use, for example, the Takitumi Northlink one in Tauranga at the moment, which is a really good example, a toll road that's been established for a long time. It's a couple of bucks for a private car. It's $4 for a truck. Is it $6, Rodney? Something like that for a truck. If you were to say that's a fixed toll, it doesn't matter what time, it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's what you pay. If you said, actually what we want to do is we want to manage congestion on the free route into Tauranga, which is congested all the time, you could make the decision to lower the toll rate on the toll road to 50 cents at peak time and encourage people to jump onto the toll road instead of the free route and reduce congestion on the free route. By contrast, you could take the opposite approach and say, we're actually going to put time of use charging on the free route now, not make it free anymore. And we're going to say, if you want to travel at 9 a.m., we're going to make it quite expensive. But if you want to travel at 11, fine, it's free or whatever. In a really, really sophisticated model in Singapore, I know they literally have a live model which alters according to congestion. And it just free flows to drive traffic behaviour. We're a long way from that because you need a fully automated network to be able to do that. But so the two are somewhat interchangeable in that respect.
Right. Okay. No, thanks.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Sandra?
Yes, thank you. I just, at the risk of being a bit of a smarty pants, I've been on the receiving end of that time of use, and they use it in Paris, and that's exactly what they do. It can change from a half hour to half hour, and you want to go through at peak times, you'll pay a good amount, but you go through at 11 o'clock at night, it's actually free. But that's exactly what they do. I just wanted to make a comment about the unintended consequences. I know what New Zealanders are like. What will happen is that the Whakamutunga government will have these roads with toll charging, and people will decide to use the alternative route, which is council-funded roads. And that is going to be a very serious issue in this country. I've absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. So that's going to have to be looked at very closely by all of us who represent our local people. It'll be lovely, and I have no argument whatsoever with charging on these brand new roads. It's the only way we're going to get them, but we might have to do the same on our own roads just to keep people on the straight and narrow, so to speak.
Thanks, Sandra. Maxine?
Thank you. Appreciate that it's pretty complex and that expensive to install the hardware. I'm thinking also about the software and the behind the scenes, I suppose, kind of back office systems stuff that can be enabling as well. And if every council or a great majority of them are going to be starting to think about this, what kind of standardized kind of processes are there, or something that can be picked up and put down in other places, and what kind of thinking about the sharing of that might be in the thinking?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things I would encourage you to do is engage with this process as much as you can now, so that those things are considered. I think for example, the national ticketing system conversation there's a learning in there about how do you standardise across councils, so you're not doing this 75 times. You do it once and then create a portal for each council to come into or whatever. We have put a pretty significant chunk of investment into our digital team to start looking at that and working with the ministry about how this would work in exactly the way you're saying, Maxine, so that not only so that it's as much as possible the one-stop shop kind of option, but also so it's future-proof for exactly the sort of Singapore model where I mean you literally just buy in advance this many hours of congestion charging, and your
Mm.
your cost center is automatically charged as you drive through, and then you get an alert to say, hey, you run out of money. We're way away from that, but that's the kind of thing. So yes, I think the point about the whole of network consideration, what are the unintended consequences, and
Mm.
let's not have 50 of these or 5 of them or whatever. I mean, let's be honest, I don't think Otrahonga or Waitomo District Council or Karakia District Council are going to care too much about congestion charging for a long, long time, but Hamilton City definitely. I think
You're
that's,
right,
you know, coming to a place near us. Tauranga City, Auckland.
But we
Christchurch.
also don't have the budgets to
No.
stand up a back office system to support it.
No.
And so would want to be able to find some.
And that's why
support
I
for
think
that.
it's important that this piece of ledge is enabling, not requiring.
Mm.
We have to have something in place by mid-2025 around the tolling, but I would really strongly encourage you to engage with the Ministry and NZTA on this so that you do get really good clarity around how you would engage in that.
Thank you.
Philip?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. David, just some general comments really and one question. Absolutely support the tolling coming into fruition. It's not a new thing. It's in place overseas in all the major centres. Nothing new about it. Weird is just having read that report from the public forum. I can't remember his name with regard to Richard Brackley. Thank you. With regard to road user charges, if we initiate all this user charging and polling, will road user charges still be in place, or will they be cut back? Or how's that going to work? Have we got that far yet?
So the intent is that road user charges will come into place across all vehicle types in the country, and that will create a revenue stream. Well, that will create that will create a fairer revenue stream in terms of distribution of costs. That should result in a reduction in fuel tax, but it won't have an impact on the decisions around tolling or time of use charging, because that's a different outcome, different purpose. It's part of the reason, for example, the ledge requires that if you're going to put tolling in place, there has to be an alternative route, a free route. And as far as I'm aware, there's no intent to change that requirement. Right, next slide. It's only one.
Oh, sorry, Rodney.
I just wanted to comment on it's already there, the electronic, when our trucks have all got electronic road tax things in them.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you drive off the road, once a month we just hit a button and we claim all the off-road case. So basically the GPS knows where the truck is.
Yeah, that's e-rucks.
So yeah, e-rucks. So I mean, if everyone wants an e-ruck in their car, it's simply, it can just automatically do it, and you won't need any infrastructure or anything.
Absolutely.
I mean, if that's been looked at,
Absolutely.
it's there right now.
And the irony is that the resistance that I've heard from people is, yeah, but then the government's monitoring where I'm driving. And I say to them, do you own a smartphone? Because if you own a smartphone, Google knows where you're driving. And you got less control over what they do with your data than you do over the government. So yeah, I don't think that's a real worry. But yeah, absolutely.
The
technology's there.
Not far-fetched, I think it's right there, right now. On my computer. So.
I look, and I spent some time with Fonterra not that long ago, and they love e-rucks. They said it's just so much easier for them to administer. Just push the button, it's done.
Yeah,
what they say, $500,000 a year less road user charges, because when they drive up a tanker track, it switches off. They're not recording. They don't have to chase it by paper. So, it wasn't good news for us, to be honest.
Yeah, on the toll road, and generally if it's a toll road, it's more efficient and cheaper to go on to pay the toll, from our point of view anyway.
Edmund.
Yeah, well, there's less fuel usage, you're faster, so right.
Yeah, well, you of all people would know, right?
Yeah, so it's basically, if you use the alternative road, it's actually going to cost you more. You might, more gas and all that, so it's, generally. So.
We did a bit of an experiment when we were doing some work on the Tupuna Highway, and we were closing the Tupuna Highway to, we had massive erosion issue, and it was over the kiwi fruit season. So we turned tolling off on the TEL, on the Tauranga Eastern Link, and encouraged all of the users to use TL for free, have a run. And they did in big numbers. Ironically, when we turned the toll road off, almost all of them went back to their old routes. Yeah, which was really interesting, which goes to the point about, Kiwis, they don't like to pay. But it was very interesting. I was like, oh no, we're going to bet you 50% of them just keep using the toll road because it's so convenient. Nope.
20 years' time.
Quite surprised. Right, next slide.
Neil,
Sorry,
did you want to, sorry, one more.
So kind of a left field question, but it does feed it right into what David was just saying. And one of the things we found when the North Island storm events, and particularly on the Coromandel, people using Google Maps and Apple Maps, and it was extraordinarily difficult to get any kind of engagement interaction with Google Maps and with Apple Maps. They do not respond. I think NZTA tried, they wouldn't respond. We had to go to government cabinet minister level to get them to advise or change the maps to say roads were closed, then go through the same process again to say roads are open. So is there a strategy for dealing with the Google Maps, or is it better just to try and direct them to NZTA? So
Yeah, and Adrian and I have been communicating on this very issue not that long ago. We do now have a pretty reliable connection into Google Maps. It is challenging. I mean, they're a huge organisation, and New Zealand's a tiny little country. But we do have a good connection now at a national level. I won't say it's their difficulty. Their model, as I said before, they know where your smartphone is. That's how their model works. So they know how fast your smartphone is traveling. They know where it is. They know how long it's been sitting still for. And if it's on a road, that's how the model updates and says, hey, there's congestion here. It's because there's 1,000 smartphones sitting still in a car. So the problem with that model is what happens is it's self-reinforcing. So if we close Karangahape Gorge, for example, there's one Old Taupo Road suddenly becomes the route that everybody takes, and then Google Maps suddenly goes, that's the route. And so everyone goes that way because Google Maps said so. So there's a bit of sort of self-reinforcing. So for us to manipulate that is challenging, but as I say, we now have a pretty good relationship. But it's still quite challenging. And as we go into this sort of stuff, it's one of the things we need to do some more work on. Because essentially what they have to do is get in and override their model to make any changes, which clearly they don't like to do. And I don't blame them. I can understand why not.
thanks, Dave.
Okay, next slide.
Next slide. Speed management. Okay, so draft land transport rule. I feel like I've been talking about this for a long time. We are very, very close to having a draft land transport rule out and in place. So once it's finalised, I have to put my glasses on. Once it's finalised, we will be coming, and hopefully actually when we're doing our next NLTP meetings with you, we'll be in a place where we actually have the draft speed rule. It's that close. Obviously, the implications of that are significant for all of you in terms of the process by which you have to set speed rules. The other thing about the speed rule, what it does is it will give you actually the detail on what roads you have to reconsult on if you have made changes post 2020. What I can tell you is that 2020 is when is if you implemented a speed change from 2020. So we had this on State Highway 2 where we thought we'd been very clever because we'd consulted on the speed change in 2019, but we didn't implement it till 2020. So now we have to go back and reconsult. That will all become clear soon, but it does have some implications for all of you in terms of if you've implemented speed changes, you will have to go back and reconsult on them. It will set speed rules for schools and rural and urban as default, and it will set signage requirements as well. So yeah, watch this space is all I can say, but we'll have some clarity pretty soon, I think. Next slide, Dave, before someone asks me a question. Emergency works policy review. So obviously we talked about this previously. with the more frequent weather events, we are reviewing the emergency work policy reviews. That is going to impact far rates. That hasn't been finalised yet, but we anticipate in the next couple of months we will get a final decision on what far rates will be around emergency works. You've already had a signal of what the proposed far rates were and an opportunity to feedback on that. So yeah, really just waiting for that to come out towards the end of December, towards the end of the year. And they will take effect, middle of next year. I mean, the upshot of that is your far rate contribution will be less from the government and more from yourselves. It's a question of how much.
Oh, joy.
Next slide, Dave. Some Waikato updates. That's the State Highway 129 roundabout, progressing enormously well. As of next week, we're going to start diverting traffic in as simpler a fashion as possible so that we can do the southern arm and get that ready for full-time use. It does mean there'll be a little bit of congestion. People will actually go onto the roundabout. And Adrian, for your once they turn left, they're in your district. There will be a bit of use of that bypass road from Karapiro service station for one day. So we'll actually shut 29 coming south, and people will have to use Topman Road. Hopefully it's 24 hours, and then they'll be able to come onto the roundabout and do a little controlled turn to continue south. But we're progressing really well. The contractors are progressing really well on that, and it's coming together brilliantly. They've been blessed by good weather. Yeah, we'll carry them on. Yeah, 24, 27. Yeah, so that comment. It'll only be the one day. It is a pretty significant detour in terms of time, but yeah, as I say, we're pretty sure we can do it in one day. Yeah. Next slide, Dave. There it is there. So it's got 2 shared path underpass structures. They've already been built. The traffic switch is coming. I think it's from next week actually, so not late September. And yeah, we'll be finished mid-2025. I'd say early 2025 if progress continues at the rate it is, but you know, can't rely on summer in this country. Next slide, Dave. So just an update in terms of our accelerated maintenance programs. So one of the great outcomes from the NLTP is that there is this huge investment in maintenance and renewal of our state highway network and local road network. We are trialling what we're calling the accelerated maintenance program. What we're trialling is essentially what happens if we just completely shut a state highway, put diversions in place and do everything all at once, rehab the whole lot, and essentially compress 4 years worth of renewals between Tito and Waiuru on State Highway 1 into 16 months. We can do that by shutting the road because obviously we don't have to worry about contraflow, we don't have partial closures, we don't have traffic management costs or time delays that go with that. The idea is that essentially it will be a total rehab of that piece of each piece of road. So starting from next week, we will be doing the Tito to Putararu section. The detour is at about 4.6 kilometres. We think about 5 minutes to the journey, but to be honest, that's a little bit of finger in the wind, and we'll see what happens with actual behaviour. We have been pretty clear, I think, what the preferred detour routes are. So State Highway 5, State Highway 28, but we accept that what will happen is some local rat running as well, and we'll do our best to minimise that. We have worked with Google Maps to try and make sure that that's really the apparent detour, but locals are going to do what locals do, and we'll manage that as best we can. The second closure from Atiamuri to Wairaki will be 3 weeks, from the 16th of September to the 4th of October. That's daytime only, so we'll be able to reopen that at night, but it's still going to be massively disrupted, we'll close the entire state highway for that period of time. And then underneath on the slide there, and I think I've sent this out to you all, is the indicative program. Now I say indicative, we've already had a conversation about the south of Turangi. Indicative because those dates all rely on the date before going really, really well, and there being no overflow in terms of timing, and they rely on a reasonable summer. Two things we're really conscious of, and both of them relate to Taupō particularly, is we've got supercars and we've got the International Ironman event this summer. So working really hard to make sure that we are cognizant of that and manage closures around that. What that means though is that there's very little wriggle room about some of these other sites. Your teams have all been party to conversations around diversions. What does that look like? What are the implications in terms of bridges? Because we've got lots and lots of bridges on some of these diversion routes that are not suitable for heavies, for example. We've done an awful lot of work, and in some cases, the preferred diversion is not the diversion that we're using simply because there are those constraints. And if you want information, one, there's an e-newsletter which you can get to if you go onto our website, and just follow your nose to Accelerated Maintenance Program, and you can subscribe to that e-newsletter. You're all on my comms thing anyway, so you'll get stuff continuously from me, from our comms team. But rest assured, your teams at an operational level are also all thoroughly engaged in this conversation.
Mike,
as are the heavy vehicle industry, everyone else.
Mike's just got a question.
Yeah, through the chair, just a general question on these big projects like that, Tūrohu to Wairau, so 4 years to 16 months. My question is, that looks good. Why does it take 16 months? My question, I guess, is it a resource issue? Is it working 24/7?
So why does it take 16 months? It
Yeah.
takes time to pull a road up and then relay it, basically. So that's how long it takes to do the physical work. The intent with these full closures is that the teams will work all the hours that are practical on it. So we're currently sitting down with contractors at the moment.
So
up for this.
these contracts and, I don't know, GETS or whatever they go on, are they internationally, any company can come in and bid for these?
We've approached the industry and said to them, we want to know who's keen to do this. And we then have gone, okay, you guys are keen, will you work together? So we've actually got contractors. It's a huge program. There are very few contractors in the country who are capable of running it.
And I guess, David, that's my whole point, I guess, is that you go overseas and you see contractors working 24/7, right, on X amount of shifts. And I mean, China's a good example of this, but I guess my question is, why don't we import expertise or a company? And I know it's competing with New Zealand companies, but I really don't care who does the road, who can do it the bloody quickest, and who can meet the criteria. So.
Yeah, and we're not shy about looking elsewhere. We are open to that. We have done that in the past, and I can think of a couple of very large infrastructure projects that we have used Australian companies for. Yeah. It's not always as simple as you think.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some experienced things that come from working in New Zealand, like understanding our Resource Management Act, understanding a whole bunch of things that are very New Zealand that undo companies from overseas quite quickly or create complications. We have got the capacity to do this,
right.
And these programs are designed to maximise, as we did on State Highway 25A, the amount of time in each day that work is being conducted.
Thanks.
The beauty of closing it is we're not stuck with we can only do one side of the road, then we've got to transfer traffic. We can't do the signage because we need the signage up at the same time. We can literally go through this and strip the whole network and then carry on. Next slide, Dave. Oh, yeah, and we've had the NLTP discussion, unless there are some more things that people want to raise. That's the presentation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Oh, actually, sorry, one more, if I can. I'll just bring up the version that I had. We are taking over the safety cameras still. So notwithstanding that the investment in safety cameras has been reduced from what we originally expected, we are still going through that process of taking over safety cameras. We expect that we'll have all of the police cameras transferred to us by July 2025. There are some new safety camera areas in our region, and what you will see starting this week, so today, is that we have 7 safety cameras in the Waikato, 1 in Bay of Plenty, and the signage for those will be going up starting today. The purpose of that signage, what we want to do is be really, really clear with people that there is a camera. So yeah, so no one will be surprised that there is a camera. And if you're surprised and you get a ticket, well, don't come back to us and tell us you didn't know it was there and it's not fair. So you'll see Cambridge Road, Statawai 2 Waikino, Statawai 2 Waihi, Statawai 23 Raglan, Statawai 2 Maramarua, Statawai 29 Te Poi, Statawai 2 Pukehina, and Statawai 3 Otrahonga. You'll see signs going up over the next couple of weeks at all of those locations saying safety camera ahead.
Thanks, David. Melian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's worth noting and congratulating David and the team, and not sure who knows this, but the State Highway 25A bridge, Taparahi Bridge, was put forward, nominated by Becca for an international award and won, which is absolutely extraordinary. So maybe, David, you can just give us a bit more detail, because that's worth celebrating.
Yeah, well, so it was Becca that put it forward in the design and implementation category. So yeah, I mean, internationally recognised as a example of excellence in terms of the work that was done, and it's pretty gratifying. Yeah,
well deserved.
Yeah, so yeah,
and I say that because the process of getting that bridge built copped a lot of flack within our local community by people, armchair engineers who knew how to do it better, quicker, faster, and were not shy in letting us know everything that we were doing, and some of the NZTA people, Whakakotahi people, came under personal abuse for their decisions, and Joe in particular.
Yeah, well, that's amazing how quickly that turns around when you open the bridge ahead of time and under budget. People go, "Oh, wow, that was amazing." So yeah, it was good. And I mean, to Mike's point, that's a really good example of what happens when you, in this case, not deliberately but accidentally, you have the road entirely closed and you can just get in and get it done. So they worked 20 hours a day at the 4 hour. In fact, I think they worked 22 hours a day, and the 2 hours was shift changeover and all those kind of necessities. So yeah, it's extraordinary what you can get done when you have that. Yeah, we're not, we have got labour laws and things like that we have to work within. So did have to have multiple shifts and manage those shifts closely. But yeah, I mean, it was well deserving of that award. I think one of the things maybe that didn't get reflected as well as it might have was how significant the contribution was from our contractors, because the whole lot who. We got quite a lot of reflected glory from the fact that they really changed the way they would normally work, and they bent over backwards to achieve it. So I was really pleased to see when Becca put that up and received that award.
Well done.
Thanks, Rodney.
Oh, well done. I was just going to ask about the cameras, the safety cameras. So are they just going to be just speed at the moment, or they see?
Yeah, they're just speed at the moment. Yeah. So I think we've talked about this previously. They're quite capable of doing all sorts of things. Yeah. We have got in New Zealand pretty strict laws around what you can and can't, data you can and can't collect, and what we can use those cameras for. We're going through a process with the ministry at the moment of getting the policies and practices in place so that we can turn on seatbelt function, red light function is already existing. These are not red light cameras. Speed, point to point, all of those things will get turned on over time, but then we've got to go through the statutory process of making sure that when we gather that data, we're not gathering other data that we shouldn't.
Sandra.
David, I just wanted to ask you, what are the criteria for a safety camera in a district? There's not a single one between Taupo and Wairau.
Yeah, they're targeted at areas where we know there are the highest safety outcome So those of you that have been here for quite a while, you'll know that initially when previous government came out, they said we're going to bring 800 cameras online over a period of time. That's been reduced for a whole bunch of reasons, and we're now looking at a much smaller number of cameras and a longer implementation period, and so we're having to prioritise based on. There's a few criteria. So one is community acceptance. So what we don't want is to go in and get a massive fight, because that just takes time and costs money. There are plenty of places we could put the cameras we've got. I mean, we've got, there's 100, well, that's an exaggeration, but, there's easily 10 to 1 in terms of places we could put a camera versus cameras we have available. So one will go where that acceptance is there. So, for example, State Highway 2, Maramarua, no one doubts that that's a horror piece of road. Slowing people down is great. There's no resistance whatsoever to putting a camera in there, and the safety outcome is significant. So really, we've just prioritised on that basis. It does mean that there's lots of places that we would love to put a camera, but we don't have them available at the moment. But they will come.
That was sort of where I was going, because coming into Turangi, you've got that very dangerous intersection in the middle there. It is supposed to be a 60, but I don't think anyone does 60. And so we take our life in our hands dropping, crossing state. I just wondered how you'd advocate for one, but if this is what you say is the situation, there's not much point in me trying to advocate for one.
Oh, what I would say is we've got a long list of where we would love to put cameras, and I can promise you that section of road is on that list. But it's simply a case of, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck for the least possible trouble at the moment?
Maxine. Sorry.
Thank you, David, for the clarity on the point-to-point stuff and the other additional functions that those cameras can perform, and we look forward to the expanded opportunity that might create, especially around safety, where there isn't always now funding to support safer road corridors. I'm thinking about the signs on the side of the road and what other public awareness campaigns you might be engaging in to, let people know about these sorts of things here. And is there an opportunity also that way to get in front of the misinformation, disinformation kind of corridor?
So we've got a really proactive channels team that do, for example, our social media campaigns. And look, I'm not going to pretend I'm of the wrong generation to know how they tweet and whatever they do. But
TikTok now.
Is it TikTok now? Yeah, I know. I've got kids. You'd think I'd know, but so they're doing a lot of work in that space, as well as just static signs that say, "Hey, there's a camera coming up." There's very targeting around certain demographics and using different platforms as a consequence of that. So, it's not actually, as you might imagine, the 16 to 18-year-old boys that are the problem often. In fact, it's my generation. So there's different. We're doing quite a lot in that space, but and on our website and things. So there is a bit of a campaign there to try and make sure that people are aware.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, through the chair, just a question around the technology that's embedded in the cameras but not used at this point. I think in Dubai you get a speed camera fine and it comes from your phone within pretty much instantly.
Yep.
So that actually, straight away you've actually just got a bill you didn't expect. So I can see how that would definitely deter you, slow you down instantly through that technology. Is that something that's built into these things for future consideration or not?
So that is about how the camera interacts with the database that they hold, and then how the database interacts with, for example, your phone. We have just piloted an NZTA app. So if you go on our website, if you go on our website and search NZTA app, we have got an app there. It's pretty basic at the moment, but the intent of that app is that ultimately will become the mechanism by which, for example, you can change your address details. Because at the moment, if you want to change your address details with NZTA, it's a bit of a process. Our intention is that app will become hey, your warrant's coming up, your registration's coming up, you can go in there and take your photo. You can do all of those things through our app, and that would be the mechanism by which you would get a hey, you just got a speed camera fine, or you've gone through a tolled road. This is the toll you owe. You can pay it on the app. So that's our long-term goal. The functionality of that takes quite a bit of investment, and as I said earlier around the variable road user charging, for example, there's the app functionality, but there's also the network functionality that enables that to happen. So yes, those cameras are quite capable of doing that. These cameras tell you what color your eyes are if they want to, but that's sort of data we can't, for obvious reasons, can't gather. In New Zealand, it would be inappropriate for us to say, hey, that was Claire St. Pierre driving that car, and she had 3 people in the car, and they were, Rodney Dow and Jeanette Osborne, and so you're protected by statute in this country from doing that. The technology, it's not a technology issue.
Yeah, right. No, it's just good. I mean, I talked to a plumber once, and he actually got fined 3 times in one day, and of course didn't find out till a month or 6 weeks later. This is a few years ago, but I thought with this technology, if he got notification the first time, he would have slowed down for the rest of the day, for instance. So good to hear.
Yeah. There is and in fact, our chief executive pointed this out the other day. There's a little bit of a danger in having your phone go bing bing while you're driving, but yeah, there is but definitely that's where we're going with this app. So yeah, look, jump on, have a look at the app, download it. It does a few things at the moment, but it doesn't do everything we'd like to, obviously. But it's a start.
Well, thanks, David, for your last and thorough report. A lot of questions. Mia Lynn, would you?
I'll be guided by you, Mr. Chair, with this appropriate time, but I think because this is David's last meeting for us, I'd like to move that we give him formal thanks and a round of applause for all of his contributions. I've certainly appreciated it. So
Thank you. Look, and can I just say in parting, thank you guys, because regional transport committees are not university supportive of my colleagues around the country. They're quite variable, and I must say I'm blessed with 2. The Bay Plenty's equally a very, very good, proactive bunch of people that I've enjoyed working with, and as are you all. So thank you very much.
So make sure you've got a clone that's replacing you.
Working on it. Interviews today and early next week. So
okay. Right. So we've got a report, regional NZTA update be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you, Rodney, and second, Adrian. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Okay, next on the agenda, we've got Angus with a update from KIWIRAIL. You there, Angus?
I am, yeah. Kia ora koutou. Nice to see you all, and lovely to hear the acknowledgement of David. As a Paeroa kid, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed the many examples provided there that all happen to be within the Hauraki District Council boundaries, David. Very, very good. Just want to make the point that the committee asked us to give various updates about our rail programs and business cases. The last time I was here, provided an update around the work we're doing up in Auckland, the rail network rebuild and various other upgrade programs like extending down to electrification down to Pukekohe. And other pieces. We are also scheduled early next year to give a thorough update around the current rail network investment program. You might wonder why is that timing early next year, and that's because we don't have an approved ARNP until probably the end of this year. So we're assuming we'll have it all lined up and ready to go for early next year. I'm looking forward to be able to give you guys a lot of detail in that session. Today, though, we are able to give you a thorough update about the work we're doing around electrification. I heard David talking about that earlier in the session. About the expense of it. It is an expensive undertaking. When we did this around Auckland a decade and a half ago, it was an expensive undertaking then. We're currently doing a piece that was missed off the list then, and that's extending ourselves all the way down to Pukekohe. Great piece of work, but that was still, hundreds of millions of dollars to do that particular section. What we're doing at the moment with our business case is working out what's next. I've said previously that if you follow demand and follow your proximity to really busy parts of the network that are already electrified, you have narrowed yourself down immediately to the North Island and places around Auckland. if we're extending ourselves down to Pukekohe, then clearly Hamilton is comes right into the frame. And once you've done that, you've connected yourself effectively all the way down to Palmerston North. And it's a question then of what else would you do? Well, we run on the Golden Triangle, massive freight volumes there, but also passenger potential as well. So some really interesting pieces of work that Walt has been leading. So that's an exciting piece of work. I just want to do a quick introduction of Walt. Walt is one of my favourite people at KIWIRAIL. We sit on the same floor here in Wellington. He has been involved in the rail industry for quite a few years. I don't want to say how many years because I don't want to age him, but he used to run the structures team in our engineering function. He's been a former professional head in our engineering team, was also the head of operations for Inter Islander for maybe, 5 years or so, Walt, until maybe 2 years ago. So very well versed in what KIWIRAIL does and the value we provide, and exceptionally well placed to be doing this particular piece of work. So I'll hand over to Walt and let him take you guys through this particular business case.
Okay, kia ora everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Angus. So I've got a bit of a brief presentation. I'm going to keep it at a pretty high level, but I'll give some teasers of some of the detail that we're diving into. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just outline what I'll cover off. So just want to give a background on KIWIRAIL's freight operations and the decarbonisation investigations, and we're focusing on electrification, and I'll cover off why that is in a sec. And we're starting to get a couple of insights in there. And while this is focused on the freight operations, it obviously has synergies with other aspects of what the railway can do, particularly regional passenger rail and providing those types of services. And then we've got a short list of locomotive options, so you'll get a bit of a sense of the direction of travel, how the investigations are going. So next slide. So before I was involved in this work, a very, very extensive investigation was undertaken into how could we decarbonise the railway, and lots of different options were looked at, and these were the main contenders. But long story short, we came back to electrification as the best way to decarbonise the railway. There were a few surprises for me, and like I obviously came into it with a very critical mind, knowing that I'd have to defend why we're making certain decisions. So biofuel, that was a strong contender, but there's no real supply chain of that at the moment. Plus, you still get a lot of emissions. And then hydrogen was an interesting case as well. But again, there's no ready supply chain yet. But the main kicker for hydrogen is that by the time you get green hydrogen, you need to have renewable electricity, go through the process to create hydrogen, quite complicated handling. And then by the time it gets to turn the wheel of a train, you've actually lost 80% of that original electricity energy. Versus if you can go from a turbine, electric turbine, to a train wheel through wires and electric motors, you only lose between 15 and 20%. So just from an energy efficiency and being straightforward, that means electricity's the way to go. And it's something that we're keeping an eye on the horizon. In fact, I went to a hydrogen conference earlier this week, and I didn't even have to ask them. They said, if you can direct electrify your networks, then it's way better than hydrogen. Hydrogen has its niches and certain purposes, but they have to be well picked. So that's where we've focused in. So an indicative business case, in effect, was undertaken. We've now gone into do a detailed business case. If you flick on to the next slide, please. Here's our overall decarbonisation pathway. So we've invested in new generation diesel locomotives. They're being manufactured in Spain by an outfit called Stadler. The first of those locomotives are on the water to New Zealand right now, and they've got the latest engine technology and will be a step change in our old sort of 40, 50-year-old type locomotives and that are less efficient and use more fuel. We're investigating electric propulsion for the Golden Triangle, and then we've also got half an eye on how we scale that up for the rest of the network, of course. Next slide. So we're focusing on the detailed business case, and as Angus talked about in the start of the presentation, it's our busiest network. So if we were to decarbonise that, that is where we'll get the biggest initial gains in decarbonisation. So that's why we're focusing it there, and it's also a nice contained area. We're not trying to boil the ocean by trying to address every single branch line up and down all of New Zealand. Next slide. So I've covered off some of these bits and pieces already. We talk about the golden triangle, but we're also covering off the feeder lines as well, because it's part of a network, and I'll show a network diagram next. We're using the Treasury Better Business Case method, so the 5 cases, so methodically stepping through that. And one thing that we've been tasked to do is look at various growth scenarios, and not just for freight, but for all rail users. And that's possibly been one of the biggest spin-off benefits of this work. And I'll talk in more detail about that. So there's some useful reveals to tell people about. And then, as I mentioned before, we need to look at how we scale it up for the rest of the network. And we've got a small multidisciplinary team. It's a very, very complicated business case, because we've got so many disciplines and so many options and so many growth scenarios. So we've got mechanical engineers, power and overhead specialists, civil and structural people, because if we have to improve clearances around bridges and other structures for some of the electric options, and how we set the depots out to accommodate electric trains, etc., etc. And then, of course, signals and communications networks also need to be considered. We head to the next slide. Here's the process we've been going through at a really sort of high level view. So on the left there, we've got all the customer requirements, the rail operations and the infrastructure, and then all those demand and growth scenarios. And then in a parallel stream, we've been looking at all electric locomotive options, and not just in the transition pathways to it. And as a general statement, the technology is rapidly changing and getting better and better and cheaper. So it's offering up a lot of opportunities that have even evolved further in the last 12 months since I've been involved in it. So we've got a whole bunch of insights. A big consideration is the power. So we've got two views on that. The upstream power, is there going to be enough power? It's a question we all want to have an answer to, and there's been a bit of an energy crisis recently, so it's sort of making this even more important to be able to address. The short answer from the work that we've done is, all things being equal, there will be enough power, but there has to be some changes in how the market settings and how that power investment happens. But certainly there's enough renewable projects in the pipeline, or could be in the pipeline, given the right environment, to be ready to power an electric railway if or when it's built in the future. And then there's a whole bunch of downstream considerations as well. So depending on the locomotive type, so if it's a battery locomotive, we need various transformers and charging points. If it's overhead power wires, we'll need grid exit points and various connections through the golden triangle area. Probably the main thing we want to find out is power going to be a constraint for our business case? And we've tested it out, and we don't think it is at this point, but we're just keeping a close watching brief on it. We've then got a short list of options, and we're digging into some more detail now, and I'm hoping to shorten up the shortlisted options in the future. So we need to fully understand the risks and opportunities and pros and cons, and we're just picking our way through that at the moment. And then I guess the other important factor is the transitional pathway. So one of my colleagues describes decarbonisation and moving towards electrification. It's like going from the steam locomotive age to the diesel age. It didn't happen with a flick of a switch or anything like that. There was a transition pathway, and certainly we don't want to retire locomotives that still have life in them, and not that would be necessarily possible anyway. So we need to look at that transition through time. And then it's a bit off the page from my screen, but there are some other secondary opportunities like regional passenger services. And then if we're putting in a lot of power infrastructure, there's the opportunity that, say, in hubs or some of our railway land, you could piggyback off that railway power infrastructure to also charge electric road vehicles. So the concept being trains doing your line haul type operations, and then electric trucks, which are, short haul electric trucks are very viable at the moment for doing those local runs. So playing to each transport mode's strengths, in effect. Next slide. So the key insights. Probably one of that is we want to come up with a business case where there's no regrets. So there's a few factors there that it's going to take a while to build. So we want to make sure that we build it and we're getting benefits. But also, if technology is changing, we don't want to build something and then the technology overtakes it and you effectively built something that's obsolete before the end of its life. So I'll give a specific example of that later on. We also think we might be asked to deliver it in stages, so we're just working how we could package it up and deliver it in a logical sequence as well. And then also, given we are going to be playing with new technology and it will be a shift for how we manage our fleet, say of diesel locos at the moment, we'll implement the new technology, learn about it, and then gain experience and then grow and build on that. So. But at the same time, realising benefits and demonstrating those so we can justify further benefits, further investment, I should say. Next slide. So we're looking at as a network. So there's obviously the main lines, but the main line only has trains on it because it's got feeder lines coming into it. So to only decarbonise the main line itself. Is probably not the best overall solution, or we won't get to the carbon reductions required. So the study is actually looking at all the arms that come off the Golden Triangle and trying to figure out the best mix. And certainly, I think it's been raised in the meeting already that overhead lines, they are very expensive, and so you wouldn't necessarily want to. Or you would never be able to justify putting overhead lines all the way down to Kinleith or Murupara. So if you're going to decarbonise the Golden Triangle, what's the mix of propulsion options that you'd use to enable that? So that's been quite challenging, and it certainly adds a lot of complexity to the study we're undertaking. Next slide. This is one of the biggest spin-offs of this project, which I think will have a lot of interest and usefulness for other projects. So we needed to understand the power requirements and the duty cycles of the locomotives, and to be able to understand that, we've had to do a massive amount of network modelling, and there's some specialist software packages that do train modelling. But we've put in various growth scenarios, like a low growth, medium, and a high growth. And we're looking beyond the sort of edge constraints of the Golden Triangle just to make sure that we understand those boundary conditions. And we've looked at all train movements, so freight and passenger. So we've got a very, very comprehensive model built and run loads of scenarios. And I guess one of the interesting reveals for me is that there's actually a lot of latent capacity there. And what we've worked out is where those breakpoints are. When you hit a ceiling of a capacity constraint, what do you need to do? And it's maybe quite a small project that might be increasing the length of a crossing loop or a signalling upgrade or something like that. It's not necessarily wholesale double tracking all the way to Tauranga and, duplicating the Kaimai tunnel and things like that. So as the capacity grows through time, we have a very good idea of how we would look to upgrade the network to suit. And as I said, there's lots of capacity there. Probably the other point about this is that Auckland becomes a factor, and that becomes a critical point for getting trains in and out. And so currently it's sort of mostly double or triple track into Auckland, but within about 20 or so years, you're going to need more or less quadruple tracking if you have some of the growth trajectories that are predicted. And that way you can be running a mixed network of a metro network, regional trains coming in, as well as a freight operation servicing the freight need. And so understanding those interdependencies and the timing of that investment's something that's going to be critical that we line up and make sure that we don't end up with any bottlenecks in the future. Next slide. This is just another lens on the business case. From a locomotive perspective in particular, so we're looking at the end state of the locomotive options, and then what are the transitional pathways, and then that scalability for the rest of the network. And as I mentioned before, what's our locomotive asset and renewals plan? Because we don't want to be retiring locomotives, when they've still got life left in them. So we can step that out for a number of decades, given the life cycle that we know about locomotives. Most locomotives, diesel locomotives, they get a midlife rebuild, so we can eke their life out as well. So there's a lot of interplay between those boxes. So that adds to the complexity of the business case that we're working through with the project team, but also the wider organisation. Next slide. This is our shortlisted options. So I'll just touch on a couple of things here without going into too much detail. But we're considering low emission diesel locomotives in case that's the best option, just to have it in the mix, and we know we'll be asked about that. The option 5, the overhead wires with new overhead locomotives, that's quite an expensive option. So there's the cost and embedding carbon of putting up the poles and the new wires and other bits and pieces. But it's a little known that you actually have to also renew your entire signalling system, because the overhead traction currents fry the existing signalling system. So you'd need to do a signalling upgrade between Auckland and Tauranga if you were to go overhead all the way. And that in itself is a very, very large cost. So we'll look at that option. It might be viable. We'll let the process work its way through. And then essentially at the other end of the spectrum is a battery only locomotives, and there's examples of that overseas already. And then there's some in-between options where you maybe have some overhead wire charging or through in-motion charging, or current from the overhead wires going straight to the traction motors, which requires quite a big traction a transformer on the train, but that limits your battery size, so you can't get the range without the wires quite so much. So we're just in the midst of that at the moment, just sort of getting into the detail and a lot more to understand what the parameters are, and then use the business case process to arrive at a preferred package or pathway. I mentioned earlier about a no regrets options, and an example of that is, say, the battery locomotive with in-motion overhead charging. Our work today indicates that battery locomotives, they can just do it between Auckland and Tauranga, and so we're then looking at the reliability of that, and that's why we've got the battery locomotive with in-motion charging. And we've worked out that maybe with a few tens of kilometres of extra overhead somewhere on the Golden Triangle route, we would be able to have that range and reliability. And so that then leads you to go, well, where would be the best point to put that extra, 20 or 40 or 50 kilometres of extra overhead? And that's where you go, oh, right, well let's keep on putting it on Pukekohe, because that would extend the metro network, and who knows, you might want to connect it all the way down to Hamilton at some point. And then should full battery locomotives suddenly become more viable, and they probably will in our lifetime, you won't have regretted investing in that overhead wire, because it will be part of the metro network. So we're just looking at sensible ways to sort of package it up and give certainty and make sure decision makers are comfortable that we're not going to be doing a big investment that would become obsolete due to technology upgrades. So I think that's about it. I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, just one more thing, which is we've got our investment logic map. Couple of slides on. Yeah, I won't go through this in too much detail, but the first one's about us decarbonising the KiWIRAIL network in line with New Zealand targets and international targets. The second driver is actually our customers, particularly our exporters, are now demanding that their transport system or the supply chain be decarbonised as much as possible. So, and I think that's going to be a big force for change in New Zealand and strengthen our backbone to actually dive in and do a lot of these things. So we're getting a lot of chitter chatter from our customers. We're seeing it in countries like Europe. They don't want to trade with countries that are not making proactive changes. So we put that in as quite a high weighting in our investment logic map. And then the last one's about reliance on overseas fuel supply chains. If we can use renewable energy within New Zealand, then it sort of takes away that volatility aspect.
Thanks, Walter. Anything else to add, or would that be it?
That's it from me. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Walter? Very informative, Walter. Quite a bit of detail in that, and obviously, yeah, as you say, it's quite complex to come out with the right option, especially with when we talk about the power crisis this year, and then also, you know, what option to go with battery and stuff like that. So, yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much for the presentation. Angela.
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief. Yeah, thank you, Walter, for your presentation, and Angus for your work as well. Hey, I'm just really interested in the Kaimai Tunnel, and yeah, interested to hear that duplication wouldn't be required. Yeah, just wondering what your priorities would be around, you know, and timelines with removing diesel locos through the tunnel, you know, to enable a quicker transition on that route, and what that might enable for passenger rail over to Tauranga.
Yeah, so a lot of that modelling showed that if, like, obviously replacing the tunnel or duplicating the tunnel would be a massive exercise. So it's not uncommon to have single line sections of track around the place. So to make sure you get the most out of the Kaimai Tunnel, you'd make sure that there's either double tracking or loops leading right up to the tunnel, and have a high-speed signalling system that can arrive and depart a train at the same time to make sure that you make this train paths as smooth as possible. So our modelling indicates you wouldn't need to duplicate the Kaimai Tunnel anytime soon, even if you put loads and loads more freight and passenger trains on the network. So and like if you want a comparison, in the Wellington network, there's quite a long section of single track tunnel, single track through a steep section near Paikokariki. And I forget the exact number of train movements today, but it's about 100 train movements or something. And it's a 3 or 4 kilometre stretch of line, and through good management and timetabling, you can actually make sure that those constraints, those critical bottlenecks, don't really stop you providing the level of service required.
And for context as well, I mean, that hundreds of movements a day in Wellington. Golden Triangle is one of the busiest parts of the freight network, but we're talking about tens of train movements a day. So the capacity is not our problem here.
I just got one question.
Yep.
Just it's really good, really interesting, and just following on from the Kaimai connection with Tokoroa, I guess it'll be a staged thing. So with the logs and produce coming up from Toke, that they, if it's electrified through the Kaimais, there'll have to be an engine there to clip on, or can diesel still go through on an electric line? I guess that's is there still that opportunity, or is it just have an engine handy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's where we'd look to have diesels, or if we were to fully decarbonise, we'd expect that battery locomotives would service down to Tokoroa and Murupara and stuff. So we're modelling all that, but like as you say, it might be staged. So we might go right. We're electrifying the main line, and then the feeder lines are diesel. But then through time, we move to full electric propulsion. Most likely to be battery, because putting it just wouldn't be cost effective to put overhead lines all the way down there.
Yeah, that's good. Unless you had farmers put solar panels on the side of the railway line that you battery onto.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think
Angus.
It's a good point about the like when Fonterra are doing upgrades to their factories, we want to make sure that we're in partnership with them so that they maybe have enough power supply to recharge our locomotives as part of any investment that they do. And so we're always actively looking at those synergies just to make sure that we get the best outcome.
Thanks, Angus and Walter. Rodney, a note?
I'm just wondering why you don't use the electric lines you've already got. I see the little diesel trains go through Outram all the time. I know you're finally fixing them up. I seen one fixed up the other day, but I don't know.
We do, and I do love this question. It's fantastic to know that
I'll
you're
keep
paying close
asking it
attention
till I
to
see
the
more
yes,
electric
it's
trains.
great. We're on track, right? So we've got 15 electric locomotives already in our fleet, and they're being refurbished. Most of them will be done by this time next year, and we already have a handful of them that are in service. But yes, you'll continue to see diesel locomotives running on that line because the NIMT is a very busy part of the networks, and we've only got 15 electric locomotives. There is no more than them, and half of them are still being refurbished.
Maxine?
Thank you. You've talked about working with partners, and Fonterra comes to mind really quickly and easily. But our local iwi and Tainui Group Holdings and the Super Hub at Ruakura, is there early engagement happening with those sorts of groups as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We met with Tainui last year just to give them a heads up that we're embarking on this work, and they were enormously interested, both in the opportunities that it presents for their business interests, but they're obviously worried about the welfare and prosperity of the region as well. We specifically talked about the Whangamarino swamp area, the wetland, and they've got a heavy interest in that. And we said, look, as we develop our work plans, if we have to be in there, that's something that would be an early doors thing that we'd want to open up dialogue on.
Thanks, Walter.
Thanks, Maxine. Okay, thanks, Angus and Walter, for your report. We've got a resolution here that the report update from KIWIRAIL be received. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Angela, and a seconder. Thank you, Phil. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, we'll finish off with a karakia from Phil.
Thanks, everyone. Unahia mai te ura tapanui, kia watia, kia mama, te nākau, te tenana, te hininaro. I te arataka koe rā e rongo, e whakairea ake ki runga, kia tēnā, humie, huie, tākie.
Thank you, everyone. And there's lunch served, and the workshop will start at 1 o'clock.